Well, hello everyone. Here, talk about right here for I don't know right here, and a lot of times it sure seems that way. That whenever you get into these conversations, a lot of times you're always want to know too is that a lot of people are going to be responding in a source of ways such as for I don't know, right? And so a lot of times it seems like yeah that whenever you do speak about conversations into a scenario, maybe if it's a discussion or something like that, and you're always want to know too is that yeah that if this is supposed to be maybe like a pop quiz or something like that, or maybe a test or any other source of a configuring of an equation or something like that, but you just to kind of get some a little bit more common sense about something. And a lot of times it seems like that you're always the one to put it into like that source of perspective, right? To where it's all about a little bit of common sense, right? But a lot of times it sure seems that way that whenever you do say I don't know to a question, though, and especially if we're talking about for an application, for any source of form or an application, does that pretty much mean is toward are you willing to provide those answers there at the time, or if anything is toward okay, well that information is not 100, it's not all accurate, or it could also be another reason why. I'm like, yeah, a lot of information, but most of the time it seems like it's over the fact that a lot of that information that it does not match with what was what was informed from earlier. So it's like so every time we do speak about a question a lot of times, and it sure seems that way. Like everybody else might say, is that really, if there's really any source of answer key to any source of equation or any source of scenario, right? So a lot of times it seems like to where that every time you have a conversation with an older brother or sister, or maybe with a parent or a friend of yours or a neighbor, that they're going to say that you start talking about stuff and start asking the questions, right? And it's like, yeah, if you respond such as hey, I don't really know, or anything like that, but still that the source of answer that maybe that you can give to somebody would probably be is toward yeah, well really that why do you think that maybe anybody would just say is toward, let's just assume. And so it's like, yeah, so a lot of times that's usually what I think about too, is that if you were to put that into a question and thinking as toward it, really that any source of scenario, right? And so every time you do think about that, and you're warned toward, okay, yeah, that assume. So really, that assuming is the same thing as guessing, right? So like everybody else might even say, is that really that my teachers used to always tell me all the time that we don't want you guessing the answer, because that's not really the same thing as thinking, right? Whenever you do think about something, that whenever you guess an answer, and a lot of times it's like you don't really want to do that on an application, but in case of anybody were wanted toward it, if you're going to be filling out any source of application, really, and 102 is that okay, yeah, that whenever you're filling out any source of paperwork, though, and let's just say that there's a few questions on there that you got to respond to, yes or no on certain questions or certain topics or certain sessions of the application, right? And you're always warned towards that, yeah, well, really, that I really don't know, but really, if it's not really, if the answer is not required, then I'm just going to mark as toward it. Well, that may not even be accurate, for you to answer. And so every time you do think about that, and you're always warned toward, yeah, you get into these conversations, maybe with an older brother or an older sister, and 102 is toward it, yeah, that you're not going to say something like, well, that's interesting, or that yeah, so you ask them a question and you don't get a yes or a no or a maybe. You say, well, I don't know, and so that's why it's like, yeah, whenever it comes to testing, a lot of times that yeah, well, really, that your best guess is fine, and I guess a lot of teachers would even say too is toward it whenever you do guess and assume an answer to something that yeah, that you possibly say is like, yeah, blah blah blah, is that's usually what but still that like everybody else might say that most of the time with most answer keys, though, that if you are asked a question, know that you can't just say NA or I don't know, to something. So the way I think about it, too, that whenever it comes to a lot of conversations, though, that whenever we talk about explain why, working on it, and as far as why not, because very well with confidence, and so whenever we do speak about I don't know, though, that what sort of answer do you think that we're really giving? Whenever we do ask those questions, and I guess any parent might even say too that do you see that most commonly used whenever it comes to trying to get children to talk and trying to get somebody to talk? And 102 is that you're going to go ahead and use I don't know on a certain sentence, and so that's why it's like, yeah, well, really that's why it seems like that. Do you really want to start out the sentences toward it? You're trying to realize or something like that. You're realizing. Trying to familiar. I'm like, trying to realize. So let's just say that on average that if you want to go and trying to put this into like maybe a scenario to where that the answers are there, but you just really have to concentrate. You really have to think about them and just try to figure out. Okay, there's something to figure out, right? And a lot of times it seems like that's usually the case, right? The typical skill, so is that figuring out. So like anybody says toward it really, when I'm like configuring, and I guess a lot of times with the source of data science, they talk about for configuring, right? But talk about for figuring. So a lot of times, if you were to use that, like talk about for any sort of things such as research, though, that it's like, that. So whenever we do think about that, a lot of times, talking about answers, though, that whenever you're going to be asking a question, though, that it's like, do you think it's real important for that other person to feel more comfortable with you asking a question rather than you just demanding answers just like that, or if anything, that you want to make the person feel a little bit more comfortable, and please tell me what's going on. So a lot of times it's like so every time you do think about that, you're always want to know too that if you were to answer I don't know right there, and then like let's just say I don't know, or compared to like what you call a yes or no answer, and yes or no, or maybe. So every time you do think about that, and you're always want to know too that whenever you do start talking about something, it's like everybody else might say is toward it really that the way you ask the questions, by the way, makes that person feel really uncomfortable with how you ask the questions. Like if you're demanding answers, or you're really asking politely for those answers. And so that's a little bit why that whenever you do have these interviews, and maybe whenever you do start asking the questions, though, that everybody else is maybe going to say is toward it, well, really, that if you're going to say I don't know all the time, what source of information are you really providing? That might be able to say, well, you could be hiding the information, or that, well, really, how do you know if that person is really being honest with you and all? But still, but a lot of times it sure seems that way, that whenever you do have these conversations, a lot of times, and you're always thinking as to where that, well, what exactly is it that we're looking for here? Are we really looking for good confidence into a full sentence? Are you really just thinking about it as to where, this person right here, that, they may not have all the right answers, but at least it maybe something that this person is willing to maybe correct out of for what they do know. So a lot of times it's like, so it's like what is the actual IQ toward it, for what you do know. Like I do know. I do know, and so really that if you were to use that into a complete sentence right here to where the I do know, do you think that maybe that brings the person closer to where you to conclude that conversation? And like everybody else might say, is to where that one thing that you do know, one thing that you do know, and let's just say that if you were to maybe copy and paste, I'm like, yeah, like everybody else might say that this conversation right here, and like every time, it's like, yeah, it starts with the clue, right? Starts with the clue. It starts with a clue, and a lot of times it seems like that's usually the case, right? That, do you really have to form any source of confidence and strength whenever it comes to, and knowledge, whenever it comes to trying to solve a question, to something like that, then you always want to know, too, that, yeah, well, really, that if you're going to say I don't know to an answer almost all the time, then it's like, yeah, well, really, that there are some things that you do know, but then still, it's like, well, really, what are the required answers? And a lot of times that's going to be the next question. What are the required answers? And so a lot of times it's like, so yeah, whenever you do have a conversation with somebody that you know, and it sure seems that way, that yeah, that what do parents tell their children whenever it comes to asking the questions, and they're going to say is toward, okay, yeah, usually a lot of their responses are usually with like maybe with like a timely manner, and like let's just say that their children respond within about maybe 10 seconds. I don't know if they really are not real willing to if they feel really uncomfortable with the person asking the question. So it seems like it's all recorded in a timely manner, right? So it's like, yeah, yes or no or maybe, but then kind of give that to the test within about maybe yeah, within maybe 30 seconds or so. Within 30 seconds, and then yeah, within 30 seconds. Usually, a lot of times usually within 30 seconds, yeah, within 30 seconds. I'm trying to put the 30 in there. I know. I kept thinking maybe it's 10 seconds. It might be 10 seconds, but you just kind of give that to a test. Everybody, that really, whenever you ask the question, do you really want to kind of give that a test toward about every question as asked, give at least 30 seconds per question, or maybe like everybody else may say that how often do you think that it's going to be equal to a minute? 1 minute. Yeah, 1 minute. So it's like, yeah, so you really want to kind of give your mind time to focus, right? And a lot of times it's like, if you want to kind of give that, put that to a test in a scenario to where that whenever you're asked a question, that a lot of times that the quickest response is going to be, well, I don't know, but then maybe the longest response is going to be, okay, yeah, well, I think I do know, or maybe I don't know, or maybe I'm about maybe 50% correct or something like that for what I do know. And so a lot of times it seems like that every time you do start talking about a lot of these conversations, right? It could be maybe to an older sibling or to a friend of yours, and that you're always thinking is toward it, yeah, that for any reason maybe why you would want to maybe set a timer to your questions, to like maybe like a word game or something like that. But like everybody else might say is to where that do you really think that you can maybe come up with a lot of good resources and conclusions to a lot of your interviews whenever you set the timer toward, okay, yeah, that what are the results a lot of times whenever you do start asking the questions, and maybe whenever you're provided answers to certain questions. And let's just say that yeah, 30 seconds per answer, and a lot of times it's like if somebody were to say is toward that, well, I really don't know, but still, that if you're only going to give them maybe 30 seconds or so, or maybe 10 seconds just to provide the answer, and a lot of times it's like, yeah, well, just to kind of give you a clue, or if anything, something to familiarize your mind with what they're talking about, and usually that usually helps, right? That to be familiar, with the question. Yeah, well, I'm trying to understand. Yeah, I'm trying to understand your question here. So, a lot of times it's like, yeah, that's usually the case, right? That people need to understand your question more clearly just before they can really give you a good positive answer, right? And that is why it seems like that whenever you do talk about interviews, whenever you do talk about having conversations, though, that it's like, why is it that most of the time that a lot of these conversations, some of them are recorded for up to 5 pages long, maybe some of them, or maybe up to 10 pages long, but really that I guess the fact to remember is just to remember is toward, yeah, that every conversation, though, really is every conversation is also on a matter of record of progress. And we can maybe look at that to where that whenever we're going to be having conversations with somebody, and a lot of times it's like, yeah, well, really, that I'm sorry, but if we're going to be having our conversation even over the telephone, or maybe if we're going to be on chat or somewhere like that, and we can't really be recording all of the conversations, and so that is why it seems like that whenever you do have these conversations, a lot of times it's like, yeah, that any sorts of, yeah, abbreviations or something like that, but really that it's like you want to know too that if you can maybe answer every question on an application to maybe a yes or no scenario, right? And you want to know too that, okay, yes or no right here to this topic, this question right here, and I don't know. But let's just say that if you were to say something like, yeah, besides maybe right here, is that yeah, that based on my knowledge. And I could maybe say, I can tell you, be quite honest with you, that you want to go ahead and start your answer by saying something like, yeah, my privilege or my knowledge. And a lot of times it's like, really, do you think that would really make a difference if somebody were to say that? This is my knowledge, my strengths, and in my goals. And so, in order to be able to put that into any sort of scenario, right? And a lot of times it's like, how many of us would maybe even vote toward that, they say is toward that, whenever you ask the questions, though, that, most of the time, everybody who's going to be listening, anybody who's going to be reading, is maybe going to say is toward it, yeah, I would like to go ahead and put this question into my point of perspective. And in that point of perspective is going to include my opinion. And maybe that's going to show a little bit more flexibility toward, okay, yeah, that, the next set of questions, that person did not say, I don't know, but that they're going to say that, yeah, something like, yeah, maybe, or maybe if that is even like, yeah, a choice to where that whenever you're filling out an application, right? But it's like, yeah, that, so whenever you do see those applications a lot of times, and you're always want to know too, is that yeah, that, if you're going to be answering a question a lot of times, that let's just say that you're not filling out any source of application. What you really are doing is that you're replying to a conversation in the discussion board. So you now have access to these to the message key right here, right, to the keyboard. And so it's like on the applications, though, that you have these word choices right here to where you can either mark a yes or a no right here, or but still that. But a lot of times it's like that. Really, if you're trying to get some comment, understanding about what the other person is thinking about, a lot of times, that you're always worried toward it. Do you think that maybe everybody else would much rather use the word of saying, for I don't know, than compare it to what you call, my knowledge? Yeah, this is, yeah. I'm sorry, but isn't this, ain't this application supposed to be about me? And then that's another question too that I'm sure that everybody would like to ask too, is toward that, isn't this case, isn't this application really supposed to be about me? It's not supposed to be about us as to, okay, yeah, set the rules and the guidelines, right? But it's like, yeah, so it's like, so every time we do think about that, and you're always one of those too, is to where that, what you really are trying to put together right here is toward, yeah, well, one thing I do know, and I can go and just put a double space right here because everybody else might say that, yeah, well, if this right here was actually a Word document for sure, the source of language that you would have to write this in would have to be more understood if you were to use double spaces, right? And I think that one of those reasons is because that if it's all squished together, and like everybody else would say, is that yeah, you understand. You may understand this very well. Maybe if you're, maybe if you are a part of that conversation, maybe if you are, thinking about, yeah, are you thinking what I'm thinking, or something like that. But it's like, but every time you do think about that and 102 is toward it, yeah, you go ahead and start up with what you do know. And so it's like, yeah, so it's like if you were to actually put that together into a scenario, that what are the chances of you being closer to solving a problem? And like everybody else might say, is that, yeah, well, really, that do you think people would say, I don't know, just for confidentiality? Like everybody else might say that, yeah, well, really, that just for confidential, for private reasons, we would have to say, I don't know, just because, just for confidentiality. And, yeah, for confidentiality. So yeah, just for confidentiality. That's one of the reasons why that a lot of these surveys, or if it's maybe an interviewer or somebody like that, anybody who's asking the questions, and they say this toward it, you would say I don't know just to protect your information, right? Just to protect your personal information from anybody who's trying to gain access, right? And maybe, and I know that that's another reason why, a lot of people would feel a little bit more comfortable with using, I don't know, for a phrase, right? And you want to know too that, yeah, for abbreviation for I don't know, and yeah, that I don't know tickle or something like that. Yeah, yeah, I would just say yeah for laugh out loud, but I can just say that yeah, IDKT or something like that. I don't know tickle or something like that. Yeah, I really don't know if anybody has tried that, but if you're going to be getting into any conversations with anybody, and I want to know too that what exactly does that mean, and did you just make that up? Like yeah, I don't know. IDKT and IDKT and have we really thought about the I don't know for abbreviation for something like that? And you want to know too that would you really want to abbreviate something? Maybe just just to refresh in your memory. And a lot of times it's like, yeah, you would really want to give a word a nickname for any reason at all. You wouldn't want to give it a nickname and maybe abbreviate a word just for that purpose. So that way, unless if you want to look at all this other stuff right here on the bottom toward it, yeah, how can I possibly remember what all this says right here? Then compared if you would actually put it into abbreviation just like this right here toward IDKT. And I tell you one thing, everybody, that if you were to use that maybe for like a PIN code or something like that, 102, that okay, yeah, if you were to say that even on an application that maybe if it is recognized, then maybe like everybody else would say is toward it, yeah, well really, if you were to use that word, that abbreviation for a code, then maybe somebody else would recognize it and say, okay, yeah, I understand. Well, okay, well, I won't ask, but so, yeah, I understand. Okay, it's confidential, but still. So it's like, yeah, you want to know too, yeah, code names. And so I really want to know too that, yeah, whenever it comes to questions and interviews, that there's code names. Yeah, code names. Just to protect your information for security purposes that code names. And so I would like to know too, just a little bit that like everybody else may want to know too, that if you're going to be filling out a lot of these online applications though, and you want to know too that talk about the language, the codes, and the type of language that is used. And you're always warned toward it that maybe not everybody understands the languages. And so any documents or anything like, the code names and the languages, right? And so a lot of times it's like every time you do fill out an application, a lot of times that there's going to be these code names that are going to be used. And a lot of times it's like, yeah, well, somebody might even say that it's the same thing from what was discussed down here, but then it was just it was converted into a shorter paragraph. And so it's like, yeah, so it's like so every time we think about that though, by the way, everybody, every time you think about that, and you're always 102, is that code names and everything, that why do you think that it's going to remind you of maybe a particular board game that you used to like playing with your older brother or your older sister or somebody? But it's like every time you do think about that, and you're always 102, that you know I'm like, yeah, you might want to look back and laugh and 102 that the thing about the common most mistakes and all that, but still, that every time you do think about that, and you're always 102 is toward how can I possibly forget that? And so it seems like that's usually the question, right? Is toward it, yeah, how can I possibly forget that? How can I possibly forget that? How can I possibly forget about that? So it's like, yeah, so it's almost like you're able to answer your own questions in a lot of ways whenever you do think about that and put all this together right here. And that is why it sure seems that way, that whenever you do ask the questions, and you're always thinking is toward it, yeah, do you think it helps to just to kind of read them out loud and also write them down, and maybe if anything is to kind of provide any sorts of clues. And that is why it seems like a lot of times that every time you do think about that, and you're always thinking is toward it, yeah, well, really, that if you were to say, I don't know, all the time, everybody else might even say is toward really, that are you even trying, or are you just guessing, or whichever, but still, that's not really, that's not a part of learning. And I know a lot of teachers might even say that, yeah, and I can understand that those teachers would probably get mad at you just because 4 weeks of classes, and you should know a little bit of that information from what we talked about from earlier, right? So I know a lot of those teachers, by the way, would say that, hey, that you should know something if you really if you really want to succeed to the next step. If you really want to pass this class, and if you really want to if you really want to provide progress, if you really want to do well in your course, that you really have to know the answers to these questions, right? And that is why it seems like that everybody else might say that really that if anybody has thought about that, to where that, okay, yeah, that you go ahead and put put the date. I can go ahead, if I can, how can I put, okay, yeah, go ahead and, I'll go ahead and put right here is the date right here, but like everybody else might say is that, if you were to put the data on the paper, right? If you were to date the paper to work, maybe that for the 20th or something like that. Yeah, it could be today's date or it could be the next week's assignment or something like that, but still. So, really, do you feel more comfortable? Yeah, so if you were to write down the date just like that, right there, and if you were to actually write that down as to where if you were to actually set a goal, and yeah, set a goal, an achievement, and set a goal. If you were to actually set a goal, then maybe you would see more progress, right? So the way we think about that, though, and you're always one to know too, that if you were to actually write down the date, then maybe you would see a difference, right? To where, yeah, somebody asked you the questions, but then you gotten different responses within those 3 weeks timing, and so that's why it seems like that every time you do try to think about that into a scenario, and you're always wondering to where that yeah, that whenever you do say I don't know, but still, that you could also think about is as toward okay, yeah, put that into maybe a point of perspective. But still, that's something to think about. But still, that every time you do think about that, and you're always want to know too that you have memories with with an older brother or an older sister, or maybe even with a cousin about those certain topics, and you're always want to know too is toward it. Yeah, how can I possibly had forgotten, the answer to that question. And so almost all the time, every time you look back at that, and you're always thinking is toward how can I possibly forget that? And but on the other hand, too, that it's like every time you try to put a question into a scenario, it sure seems that way toward it. Do you call that maybe a challenge, or do you just really kind of call it what you call the common peace of mind, right? And so every time you think about that, and you're always thinking is toward it, yeah, it's all about testing, right? But at the same time, know that yeah, are you really building better confidence? And I know a lot of teachers are probably saying too that in order to be able to improve our progress right here to where the building better confidence. So every time you do think about that, and you're always thinking too that you want to think about it that way, to where that in order to be able to improve the progress here, that yeah, you go ahead and ask the questions, but then of course they say that there's going to be what you call this wrong answer, but then on the other hand too is like to where they well, I really don't know what to tell you, like, well, but still that but at the same time, it's like you're always want to know too that the best way of how to to solve that situation would be is toward it making that person feel a little bit more confident with answering the questions, right? So a lot of times you're always want to know too is to where that every time you do want to ask the questions, that you want to make that person feel more confident with why the questions remain on this application, and please explain, why do you need the information about that? And so that is why a lot of times it's like I don't blame anybody that whenever you're going to be filling out an application, that it's like there's going to be these tabs to where that they're going to tell you that the reason why we need to know the answers to these questions is just to determine your eligibility and your qualifications, just to be able to receive, just to be able to receive, these benefits and the stuff like that. But whichever that you're going to be applying for, right? But a lot of times it's like you're always want to know too that you see that to where people, a lot of kids, they're going to say is to where well, I don't really know, or because, but if you were to put that into like maybe a perspective right here to where go ahead and underline that right there. It says to where my knowledge. So a lot of abbreviation, right? But still, that a lot of a question, a lot of interviewers would maybe say is toward that person that you're talking to might think is toward but I would like to answer these questions at my own point of perspective and to my knowledge, instead of you setting the rules and the guidelines all the time. And so that's why, maybe children might even say too, is that if you're going to be if you're going to be asking the questions though, why is it that maybe that a lot of their responses are really is toward making them feel more comfortable with why you ask the questions. And so that's why maybe a little bit like everybody else may say is toward well, you know how that is that if you're trying to put together, if you're working at your own private time, and let's just say that if you were going to be writing in your journal, right? And your journal, of course, is going to say something a little bit different than compared to what's provided on the application, right? But like everybody else might even say, is to where it seems like a lot of it has to do with what you're using that information for. Why do you need this information? What you're using it for? What you're using my information for. So a lot of times it's like, so really, do you really have to explain to anybody why they ask all the time, or for any reason at all, that if it is in regards to an application, no, but still it's like you're always want to know too do you really see that more often than compared to my knowledge, or that to build better confidence. But the way I think about it too is toward that whenever you do speak about confirmation, Mike, getting the conversations a lot of times, it's all about the talking to those who you know and trust, and those who you really want to get closer to, right? And everybody else might say is to where we're not related, but we have a lot in common. But still, it's like every time you do think about that, you're always thinking too that how is it that you're able to make consider this person to be your best friend, your best friends, and so that's the next set of questions, right? How is it that this person is going to be considered to be your best friend? Knowing as to where that any information or anything that you're trying to, based on your research, right? And you're always thinking as toward, okay, the code name and language, but anything that you're just trying to understand, right? But anyway, but talk about from my knowledge, if it was toward that, I don't know, then compared to feeling more confident with answering the questions, right? But anyway, thanks for watching, everyone, and have a great day.